Hello and welcome to another episode on the White Dog Garage YouTube channel. My name is Bob. This episode is going to be a little different to my normal fare. Instead of being about something that I'm making, it's going to be about something that was made by somebody else, somebody I don't know. It's going to be about this coffee table. I picked it up at the side of the road. I thought I would do a simple refinish and move it on. When I looked into it further, well, really I'm just going to scrap it. But it's such an interesting piece that I thought I would share its construction with you, and I hope you follow along. You as the viewer probably realise that YouTube videos are not necessarily filmed with all the information to hand, and this is definitely the case here. I now know that the table was almost certainly made prior to 1820. Putting that in perspective, I live in Australia. British colonisation of the East Coast commenced in 1788, and in the area where I live, about 1824. Pulling this table apart was a real eye-opener to joinery techniques of the period on how to build a robust piece of furniture without using nails or screws. The table is perfectly square and is 34.5 inches wide and deep, which is 876 in those dastardly French millimetre units. Remembering that when this table was made, the British Empire was either at war with or had just defeated the French. The drawers were held together by dovetails, which had been nailed at a later date in the life of the table. Half-blind dovetails are used to attach the sides to the drawer front, and full dovetails hold the rear. The rear of the drawer sides slopes to the bottom. The bottom consists of 3 boards, which are held in the plane by the use of dowels and secured in the position by grooves along the inside of the front and rear drawer ends, along with the dowel midway along the drawer side. The metal drawer pulls or handles look to be made out of copper and have been hand cut and hand beaten to shape. They are held in place by nails made from the same material, which are probably the only original nails used on the table build. The drawer fronts have been hand shaped. When I feel along the surface of the edge, it is smooth in some areas and somewhat scalloped in others. The table is 22 inches or 559 millimetres high. Given its likely age, it would not have been a coffee table originally, and when I looked closely at the legs later on, I could see they'd been cut down, and it was more likely that this was either a full table or probably a writing desk. The base of the table initially looked like it had been made from recycled weatherboards, which are typical in Australia of older houses used as a cladding on the outside. But on closer inspection, I think the boards were originally painted white. Some have lost their paint or they've been sanded back over time. I'm pretty sure the 2 support boards are a relatively modern manufacture, replacing originals which probably decayed away or whatever. My evidence for this is they're dressed all round machining. The tenon ends are sawn to provide a reduction in size. In other parts of the table, when they wanted to do this, they merely chiselled the wood away. And the fact that the shoulders on the tenons are well back from the mortise, indicating that they were made short, and that would enable to be slid forward in the mortise and then slid back and then secured to hold the boards in place. The other thing, of course, is the support boards are a selection of screws and nails are holding them in place and to stop them moving and thus falling out. Almost all of the mortise and tenon joints used in the construction of this table use 3 mortises, with the outlying of the accompanying tenon obvious as you look around the table. Also, as we make our way around the table, we see near all the joints what look like punched nail heads with a putty covering. But it's not all as it seems, as I was soon to find out. Looking inside, you can notice quite a lot of chiselled areas. One thing I found with this table was that whilst the outside appearance was perfect, well, it was once upon a time, the underlying structure, while sound, was certainly left in a rough state. But I guess it was a case of what you don't see doesn't matter. The wedges seen here anchor tenons which are pinned at the other end and so hold the centre of the breadboard ends running parallel to the underdeck cross members. Quite an ingenious arrangement, I think. Like the drawer fronts, the panels have been hand carved to shape. However, there was nothing ornate about the carving, and this table was certainly made to be just a functional piece of furniture. Three of the miter joints on the breadboard ends of the table are perfect, and the remaining one is just a smidgen out, so my hat goes off to the builder. It's not an easy thing to achieve, especially with hand tools. The miter joints are held together by pinning through the mortise and tenon joints, very neat indeed. So it's on to wrecking the table. My tools of destruction are a claw hammer, a pry bar or jimmy, and a 1 1/4 inch or 32mm wide wood chisel. I start by trying to prise the top off. I use the chisel to create a gap and then use the pry bar to prise the tabletop away from the frame. It doesn't come easy, however. It's only now that I discover what I thought were nails that are in fact dowels, and on inspection find that they're not dowels as I know them. And I'll get back to that a little later in the video. With the tabletop off, I start on the support structure. I remove some pieces that have been nailed in. I don't believe any nails were used in the original build apart from the draw pills. And whilst the timber here looks of a similar age to the rest of the table, I think any nails found here have been added later. In fact, I think the cross member was originally one of the supports from underneath that was replaced with the supports that are there now. The frame essentially consists of 8 posts separating the top and bottom rails, with panels between the posts on 3 sides and the drawer fronts forming the 4th. The 4 corner posts are being the actual legs of the table. All of the posts have a tenon at the top, which was pinned to the corresponding mortise in the tabletop's breadboard ends. Removing a panel, I see that it is held in place by grooves in the corresponding posts. Then, with the appropriate application of brute force, I remove the front section, noting that the use of blind mortise and tenon joints this time, along with the mitered ends on the front. I am totally blown away by the use of compound miter joints where the bottom rails connect to the leg, along with the use of 2 dowels to pin the tenon. It makes for an awfully strong joint, but the time and skill that would have taken to do these by hand, I'm just amazed. I then moved on to disassembling the floor of the drawer compartment. These cross members are definitely a later addition and are screwed and nailed to the underside of the boards. The boards themselves are pinned together using dowels, but not dowels as we normally see them. Finally, I've returned to the tabletop and I've set about deconstructing it. First, I removed the wedges that held a pair of tenons in place. These tenons are pinned, and this time I drilled the dowel pins out rather than breaking them out. These tenons provide midpoint attachment for their respective breadboard ends. Quite an ingenious way of holding it all together, I think. With the pin drilled out, I used my chisel to drive the tenon back out of the mortars. I then repeat this process for the opposite tenon, noting that in general all of the tenons have been quite a tight fit, another testament to the builder. Then I move on to the cross members, drilling the pins out that hold the tenons in place and then knocking the breadboard ends out. I then set about removing the cross members from the boards. Probably worthwhile restating a comment I made at the beginning here, that these videos are not necessarily filmed with all the information to hand. I'm sure you can see this is the case here. At this stage, I thought the cross members were merely a tight fit in rebates underneath of the tabletop, and prizing them out along with a good tap from the hammer would free them. What I discovered just blew me away. The top of the cross members were dovetailed to provide a sliding dovetail joint with a corresponding socket across the underside of the table board. Remember, this was done with hand tools. So, this time, putting my brute force and ignorance approach to things aside, I was able to tap the cross members out along the sockets in the remaining boards. A very smooth operation. Going in for a close-up here, you can see on the table board underside the socket part of the dovetail joint, not to mention the dowel pins that align the boards. Looking at the cross member close-up, you can see the matching dovetail. Just imagine making joints like this by hand. This is a normal dowel that we use today, just out of my collection of bought dowels. It's got a ridged edge to allow glue to pass by, and it's got shaped ends so that it will hammer nicely into the pre-drilled dowel hole. Here are two of the dowels recovered from the table. The larger one is typically used for securing the mortise and tenon joints in the structure. It's hand formed, it's not turned at all. If anything, I'd say it's just whittled to shape. A hole is created and it's hammered home. There may be a little residue of probably an old casing glue there, perhaps not, perhaps just timber residue. The thinner one, this is used to connect boards together to make the flat surfaces. Again, a hole is created and obviously it's sharpened at both ends. You can see there, sharpened at both ends, and the two boards forced together to create a larger flat surface. In much the way a domino would work in that situation, I guess an early form of a domino. Having destroyed the table, I'll finish by reviewing the component parts. Close inspection of the leg ends indicates that they have been cut to bring the table down to coffee table height, which means that originally it would have been a desk or some sort of writing table, I suspect. The base I originally thought was old weatherboards, recycled. These interesting dowels. Then we move through to inserts. And the actual frame of the table piece. And look at the panels. I thought originally they were maybe planed into shape, but when I run my finger along, it distinctly looks like they've been carved. Feels like they've been carved. And once again, more mortise and tenons and more dowel joints. The table was put out as junk, destined for landfill, and on that basis I collected it. Looking at it when I got it back to the garage, I thought at the time it was a roughly constructed table and of little value. I decided I'd break it down to provide wood for other projects and thought I would film the wrecking of it. As I went along, I thought the joinery was really good and was fascinated by the exclusive use of dowels to secure the joints. Thinking it was a coffee table, it didn't really click with me that it was a genuine antique until after I'd reduced it to a pile of rubble and set about looking up the origin of the interesting dowel arrangements that I had seen used. Looking on the internet, I find that with the absence of nails, type of dowels used, and a few other features that the table had, that it was probably made no later than about 1820. Just what had I done? Indeed, what had I done? Well, the table was a very basic bit of furniture. It had been altered beyond reasonable restoration already, and it was going to landfill, so I'm not going to cry about it. But this table was built to last. The joinery used was spot on, and when you think about the time and skill needed to do that, using just hand tools, absolutely amazing. Certainly an eye-opener for me, and I hope an eye-opener for you, the viewer, as well. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, I'd welcome a thumbs up, and by all means, share it amongst your friends. This channel is about making, maintaining, fixing and restoration projects, and if you like that sort of thing, and who doesn't, and you haven't already subscribed, well, think about subscribing. It's easy. Just hit the subscribe bar down below. While you're there, ding the bell beside it so that you're reminded by YouTube every time a new video comes out on the White Dog Garage YouTube channel. Thank you once again.